The Galactic Council chamber hummed with nervous energy as representatives from across known space gathered for an emergency session. Ambassador Zephyr of the crystalline hegemony adjusted his translucent form, light refracting through his body as anxiety coursed through his molecular structure. Beside him, the massive bulk of Counselor Throck from the Stone Warriors shifted uncomfortably, his granite-like skin crackling with tension. At the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed the devastation that had shocked the entire galaxy. The Xerian Empire's Third Fleet lay in ruins, their once mighty dreadnoughts reduced to twisted metal and floating debris. But this wasn't the work of another galactic superpower or some ancient weapon. This destruction had come from a small blue planet on the outer rim, a world that most species had barely noticed until now. "The humans call it Operation Broken Chain," announced High Arbiter Velthara, her 6 arms gesturing to the horrific display. In 72 standard hours, they dismantled an entire battle fleet that had been enslaving their colonies for 3 rotations. A collective shudder ran through the assembled delegates. The Xerian Empire had been one of the galaxy's most feared military powers, known for their brutal efficiency in conquering primitive worlds. They specialized in enslaving developing species, using advanced weaponry and overwhelming force to crush any resistance. No one had ever successfully challenged them until now. "How is this possible?" demanded General Korath of the War Clans, his scarred face twisted in disbelief. "The humans barely achieved faster-than-light travel 2 of their decades ago. They should be defenseless against Xerian battle doctrine." High Arbiter Velthara's expression darkened. That's what the Xerians believed as well. They had been systematically harvesting human colonies, taking millions as slaves for their mining operations. The humans sent diplomatic protests, which were ignored. They offered tribute, which was accepted but didn't stop the raids. For 3 years, they endured this treatment while their people suffered. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Most species, when faced with superior technology and firepower, would either submit or be destroyed. The galactic order had remained stable for millennia because primitive worlds understood their place in the hierarchy. Then something changed, Velthara continued. "Our intelligence suggests the humans held what they call a global referendum. Every human settlement, every colony, every nation on their homeworld voted on a single question, whether to accept their fate or fight back, regardless of the cost." Ambassador Zephyr's crystalline structure flickered with confusion. Surely they understood the futility. The Xerians possess weapons that could sterilize their entire planet. "The vote was unanimous," Velthara replied, her voice carrying an edge of something that might have been fear. 7 billion humans across hundreds of worlds and stations, not a single dissenting vote. They chose war. The display shifted to show footage from the battle, captured by long-range sensors. The human fleet that emerged from their system looked primitive compared to Xerian technology. Their ships were angular, functional things that seemed cobbled together from industrial components. They had no energy shields, no exotic weapons, no apparent advantages. What they had was something else entirely. The humans didn't fight like any known species. They didn't seek glorious single combat like the War Clans, didn't rely on overwhelming firepower like the Iron Dominion, didn't use subtle tactics like the Shadow Syndicate. Instead, they fought with a cold, methodical precision that spoke of careful planning and absolute commitment. "Watch this section carefully," Velthara said, highlighting a portion of the battle. The Xerian flagship, the Eternal Conquest, was considered unsinkable. 40 kilometers of hardened armor, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The footage showed human ships swarming around the massive vessel like insects around a giant. They took horrific casualties, entire vessels vanishing in bursts of energy fire. But they kept coming, each ship targeting specific points on the dreadnought's hull with surgical precision. "They're targeting life support systems," observed Counselor Throck, his stone features shifting with surprise. "Not weapons or engines, they're trying to suffocate the crew." "Correct," Velthara confirmed. While the Xerians focused on destroying the human fleet, the humans were systematically cutting off air, water, and power to inhabited sections of their ships. They turned the Xerians' own size against them. The battle footage continued, showing human vessels ramming Xerian cruisers at full velocity, their crews sacrificing themselves to create breaches in enemy hulls. Others deployed what appeared to be modified cargo containers that released clouds of metallic particles, clogging enemy sensors and weapon systems. "They're using industrial equipment as weapons," whispered Ambassador Keeningwind from the Cloud Dancers. "Mining charges, construction drones, even cargo haulers converted to missile platforms." But the most disturbing part wasn't the improvised weapons or the brutal tactics. It was the coordination. Every human ship moved as part of a greater whole, as if controlled by a single mind. When one vessel was destroyed, others immediately filled its role. When a tactic failed, they adapted within minutes. "This level of coordination is impossible," declared Science Adept Korth from the Mind Collective. "No species can achieve perfect unity across an entire fleet without technological enhancement." Velthara's expression grew grim. "Our analysis suggests they weren't using technology at all. The humans appear to have achieved this coordination through what they call doctrine and training." Every individual knew their roles so completely that they could function as a single organism. The final moments of the battle played out on the display. The Xerian fleet, despite their technological superiority, found themselves outmaneuvered and overwhelmed. Human ships that should have been destroyed hours ago continued fighting, held together by what appeared to be nothing more than determination and improvised repairs. "The Eternal Conquest's final transmission was a surrender offer," Velthara announced. "They proposed terms, offered reparations, even suggested a formal apology. The humans' response was to accelerate their ramming attack on the flagship's command section." The massive dreadnought's destruction lit up the display like a dying star. With their command ship gone, the remaining Xerian forces scattered in panic, pursued by human vessels that showed no mercy and asked for no quarter. "The humans have released a statement," Velthara continued, bringing up a simple text message that had been broadcast across all galactic frequencies. It reads, "The Xerian Empire has forfeited their right to exist through their crimes against humanity. All Xerian military assets are hereby considered legitimate targets. Civilian populations will be protected, but all government and military personnel are subject to justice under human law. Surrender is no longer an option." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Dozens of species began talking at once, their translators struggling to keep up with the cacophony of languages. "They're declaring war on an entire galactic empire," General Korath said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Not just their fleets, but their entire civilization." "That's impossible," protested Trade Prince Mexler from the Merchant Guild. "The Xerian Empire spans 3,000 star systems. They have allies, defensive treaties, economic partnerships. The humans can't possibly challenge an empire of that scope." Velthara raised her arms for silence. "Intelligence reports suggest the humans are already moving against Xerian outposts throughout their territory. They're not seeking to conquer or occupy. They're systematically destroying every Xerian installation, ship, and military asset they can locate." "What about their allies?" asked Ambassador Zefter. "The Silver Concordat has a mutual defense treaty with the Xerians." "The humans sent them a simple message," Velthara replied. "Any species that aids the Xerian Empire will be considered complicit in their crimes. Withdraw all support immediately or face the same consequences." The chamber fell silent again as the implications became clear. The humans weren't just fighting a war, they were making a statement to the entire galaxy. They were drawing a line that they would not allow anyone to cross. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," High Arbiter Velthara declared. "For 3 rotations, we watched the Xerians enslave and brutalize human colonies. We classified it as a normal expansion pattern, nothing worthy of intervention. We were wrong." She gestured to the debris field where the Xerian Third Fleet had died. "The humans have demonstrated that they possess something we didn't account for in our calculations. They have shown that technological superiority means nothing when faced with absolute determination." Counselor Throck's massive form shifted. "What do you recommend?" "We observe," Velthara said quietly. "We watch what the humans do next, and we pray to whatever powers we worship that we never give them reason to turn that determination against us." As the council session ended and delegates began filing out, each species representative carried with them a new understanding. The galaxy had just witnessed something unprecedented, a primitive species that refused to accept its place in the established order. The humans had crossed a line that no one else had ever dared to approach. They had declared that some things were worth any price, any sacrifice, any consequence. The question now was what they would do next, and whether the galaxy was prepared for the answer. The Reckoning. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the tactical display as her fleet approached the Xerian stronghold of Kethmora Prime. The massive space station orbited a gas giant, its sprawling infrastructure home to over 10 million Xerian civilians and military personnel. Intelligence reports indicated it served as both a major shipyard and the administrative center for their slave operations in this sector. "Admiral," reported Commander Martinez from the communications station, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different factions within the station. They're all claiming they had no involvement in the enslavement operations." Chen's expression didn't change. She had heard similar pleas from every Xerian installation they'd encountered over the past 6 months. The pattern was always the same: confident defiance when they thought they held the advantage, desperate negotiation when they realized the humans meant business, and finally frantic surrender offers when the attack began. "Standard response, Commander. All Xerian military personnel and government officials are subject to human justice. Civilians will be evacuated and protected, but the infrastructure must be destroyed." The Xerian Empire had made their choice when they began enslaving human colonies. Every decision since then had been merely a consequence of that original act. "Fleet Admiral Chen," came a transmission from the station. "This is Sector Governor Vexnell. I formally request negotiation under the Third Galactic Convention. We can discuss reparations, prisoner exchanges, territorial concessions." Chen gestured for Martinez to cut the transmission. There was nothing to negotiate. The humans had made their position clear from the beginning. The Xerian Empire's crimes against humanity could not be forgiven, forgotten, or compensated. Justice demanded complete accountability. "Engineering reports ready on all ships, Admiral," called out Lieutenant Park from the engineering station. "The gravitational destabilizers are charged and locked onto the station's structural weak points." Chen nodded. The gravitational destabilizers were perhaps humanity's most terrifying innovation in this war. Rather than simply destroying enemy installations with conventional weapons, they manipulated local gravity fields to tear structures apart from within. It was efficient, thorough, and left very little debris that could be salvaged or repaired. "Begin civilian evacuation procedures," Chen ordered. "All non-military personnel have 30 minutes to reach evacuation pods. Broadcast the safety corridors and landing zones." This was the part that confused other galactic species the most. Humans fought with absolute ruthlessness against their enemies, but went to extraordinary lengths to protect innocent lives. Even when facing an empire that had enslaved millions of their people, they took time and risked their own safety to evacuate civilians. "Admiral," interrupted Captain Williams from the UES Vengeance, "Xerian Fourth Fleet is approaching from the system's edge. Estimated arrival in 47 minutes. "Let them come," Chen replied calmly. "How many ships?" 312 vessels, including the super dreadnought Endless Victory. It's one of their newest ships, Admiral. Our intelligence suggests it carries experimental shielding technology." Chen studied the tactical display as enemy contacts appeared at the edge of the system. The Xerian Fourth Fleet was one of their most elite formations, commanded by War Prince Corvash the Unyielding. Intelligence reports suggested Corvash had never lost a battle and had personally overseen the enslavement of over 50 primitive worlds. "Signal the fleet," Chen commanded. "Implement Formation 7. All ships are to maintain evacuation protocols until civilian extraction is complete, then we eliminate the Fourth Fleet." Around the massive space station, evacuation pods launched in streams as terrified Xerian civilians fled their homes. Human ships moved with precision to protect the evacuation routes, their point defense systems destroying any debris that might threaten the escape pods. This behavior baffled enemy commanders. In previous galactic conflicts, civilian casualties were considered acceptable losses, sometimes even strategic advantages. The humans' insistence on protecting enemy noncombatants seemed like a weakness that could be exploited. "They were wrong." "Evacuation complete, Admiral," reported Martinez. "All civilian pods are clear of the destruction zone." "Commence gravitational destabilization," Chen ordered. The space station Kethmora Prime, built over centuries and representing one of the Xerian Empire's greatest engineering achievements, began to tear itself apart. Invisible forces twisted its massive superstructure, causing support beams to buckle and habitat modules to collapse inward. Within minutes, the sprawling complex had been reduced to an expanding cloud of metal fragments. "Zirian Fourth Fleet entering engagement range," announced Captain Williams. "They're broadcasting demands for our immediate surrender." Chen smiled grimly. "Open a channel to War Prince Corvash." The main screen flickered to life, showing the angular features of the Zirian commander. His four arms were spread wide in a gesture of dominance, his black eyes gleaming with confidence. "Human Admiral," Corvash spoke in accented Galactic standard, "you have made an impressive demonstration, but you face the Fourth Fleet now. Surrender and your deaths will be swift." "War Prince Corvash," Chen replied, her voice carrying across space with perfect clarity. "You are guilty of crimes against humanity. Your forces enslaved over 2 million human civilians from the Centauri colonies. You personally supervised the construction of labor camps that resulted in the deaths of 137,000 men, women, and children." Corvash's expression shifted to confusion. "These are the accepted practices of galactic expansion. Primitive species serve more advanced civilizations. This is the natural order." "Not anymore," Chen said simply. "You have been judged guilty under human law. The sentence is death. Your fleet will be destroyed, and any survivors will face trial for war crimes." "Impossible," Corvash snarled. "You command barely 200 ships against our 300. Our technology is superior, our crews more experienced. You cannot hope to achieve victory." Chen's expression remained calm. "War Prince, you fundamentally misunderstand the situation. We didn't come here to achieve victory. We came here to deliver justice." The transmission ended and Chen turned to her tactical officer. "All ships engage at will, no survivors." The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The human fleet moved with the same precision and coordination that had destroyed the Third Fleet, but now their tactics had evolved. 6 months of constant warfare had taught them lessons that transformed their approach to combat. Human ships no longer fought like the desperate underdogs that had first challenged Zirian supremacy. They fought like apex predators that had learned exactly how to kill their prey. The Zirian formation relied on traditional galactic combat doctrine. Massive ships with heavy armor and powerful weapons, supported by smaller escorts that provided screening and point defense. It was a proven strategy that had dominated space warfare for millennia. The humans tore it apart in 17 minutes. Instead of engaging in direct ship-to-ship combat, human vessels used coordinated strikes to disrupt Zirian formations. Swarms of small attack craft, many of them converted civilian vessels, overwhelmed enemy point defenses while larger ships targeted specific vulnerabilities. "Their new shielding technology," reported the tactical officer as the Endless Victory maneuvered to engage. "It appears to be completely ineffective against our gravitational weapons." Chen nodded. The Zirians, like most galactic species, thought of warfare in terms of energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. They had developed defenses against lasers, plasma cannons, and missile attacks. They had never encountered weapons that manipulated the fundamental forces of physics itself. The super dreadnought Endless Victory, pride of the Zirian fleet and War Prince Corvash's flagship, lasted less than 3 minutes once the human gravitational destabilizers locked onto its hull. The massive ship simply folded in on itself as localized gravity fields compressed its armor plating beyond the breaking point. "Sir," called out the communications officer, "we're receiving surrender offers from the remaining Zirian ships. They're requesting quarter under the galactic conventions." Chen watched the tactical display as enemy vessels began breaking formation, some attempting to flee while others powered down their weapons in surrender. The human fleet pursued both groups with equal determination. "Negative," she replied. "No quarter, no survivors, no mercy." The words sent a chill through her bridge crew, but they understood the necessity. The Zirian Empire had to be completely eliminated, not just defeated. Any survivors would likely regroup, rebuild, and continue their practices elsewhere. The galaxy needed to understand that some crimes could not be forgiven. The destruction of the Zirian Fourth Fleet took another 23 minutes. Human ships systematically hunted down every enemy vessel, including those that had surrendered and those attempting to flee. When the battle ended, 312 Xerian ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. "Admiral," reported Martinez, "we're receiving transmissions from across the sector. Multiple species are requesting immediate communication." "Put them through," Chen ordered. The main screen split into dozens of smaller displays, showing representatives from various galactic powers. Chen recognized delegates from the Silver Concordat, the Trade Federation, the warrior clans, and several other major factions. "Admiral Chen," spoke Ambassador Velthara from the Galactic Council, "we formally request an immediate ceasefire. The Council is prepared to mediate negotiations between humanity and the Xerian Empire." Chen studied the assembled faces on her screen. Fear was visible in every expression, regardless of species. The galaxy's major powers had watched humanity systematically dismantle one of their strongest military empires, and now they were beginning to understand the implications. "Ambassador," Chen replied, "there will be no negotiations. The Xerian Empire will be completely destroyed. Any species that provides them aid, shelter, or support will be considered complicit in their crimes." "Admiral," interrupted Trade Prince Mexler, "you must understand the economic implications. The Xerian Empire controls major trade routes, mining operations, manufacturing centers. Their destruction would destabilize the entire galactic economy." "That is not our concern," Chen answered simply. "The economic benefits of slavery do not justify its continuation." Ambassador Zefter's crystalline form flickered with agitation. "But the precedent this sets, if every species begins settling grievances through total warfare." "Then perhaps," Chen interrupted, "every species should consider the consequences before committing acts that warrant total warfare." General Korath from the warrior clans leaned forward on his display. "Human Admiral, your species shows impressive combat capability. The clans would be honored to offer you alliance, territories, favorable trade agreements." "General," Chen cut him off, "we have investigated your species' practices. You maintain gladiator pits stocked with sentient beings from primitive worlds. You sell prisoners of war as entertainment. You will cease these activities immediately, or you will join the Xerians in extinction." The silence that followed was absolute. Every delegate on the screen seemed to grasp, for the first time, the true scope of humanity's intentions. This wasn't just about the Xerian Empire. This was about fundamentally reshaping galactic civilization. "We're not here to conquer you," Chen continued, her voice carrying clearly across space to dozens of different worlds. "We're not here to rule you or exploit you or demand tribute. We're here to establish a simple principle. Sentient beings have inherent rights that cannot be violated, regardless of their technological development or military power." She paused, letting her words sink in across the galaxy. "Any species, any empire, any individual that enslaves sentient beings, that treats people as property, that believes might makes right, they will answer to humanity. There will be no negotiations, no mercy, and no second chances." The transmission ended, leaving silence on the bridge of the UES Retribution. Chen turned back to the tactical display, where the debris of the Xerian Fourth Fleet drifted in the space around what had once been Kethmora Prime. "Set course for the Xerian homeworld," she ordered. "Maximum speed." As the human fleet vanished into hyperspace, emergency sessions convened in government chambers across the galaxy. The message had been received loud and clear. Humanity was not just fighting a war, they were conducting a revolution. And they were winning. Hash the judgment. Emperor Zexter, the Eternal, stood in his palace throne room, watching through massive transparent walls as human ships appeared in the space above his homeworld. The Xerian capital of Xerthis had never been threatened by enemy forces in its 5,000-year history. The planet's orbital defenses were considered impregnable, its location deep within the Empire's core territory making attack impossible. Yet there they were, 200 human vessels hanging in space like harbingers of doom, their simple angular designs somehow more terrifying than the most elaborate dreadnoughts ever built. "My Emperor," announced Grand Admiral Thexmore, his voice tight with barely controlled panic, "the First Defense Fleet has taken positions around the orbital stations. Admiral Yexgar reports ready to engage on your command." Zexter's four arms gripped the crystalline armrests of his throne, his black eyes fixed on the human fleet. In the past 18 months, these primitive creatures had systematically dismantled his empire. Fleet after fleet, world after world, installation after installation. The humans had moved through Xerian space like a consuming fire. Status of the evacuation? The Emperor asked. 70% of the civilian population has been moved to the deep shelters, reported Minister Kexville from the Emergency Command Center. The remaining 30% refused to abandon their homes. Zexter nodded grimly. His people had ruled this sector of space for millennia. Many could not comprehend that their supremacy was ending, that the natural order they had known all their lives was being violently overturned by a species they had considered barely more than animals. "Open a communication channel to the human fleet," the Emperor commanded. The throne room's display screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a human warship. A female human in military uniform looked directly at him with cold, calculating eyes. This was Admiral Chen, the architect of his empire's destruction. "Emperor Zexter," Admiral Chen spoke without preamble, "you are guilty of crimes against humanity and violations of sentient rights. You have been judged and found deserving of death. However, we offer you one final opportunity." "Speak," Zexter replied, though he suspected he already knew what the humans would demand. "Total surrender," Chen continued. "Immediate dissolution of all military forces, complete surrender of all government officials for trial, reparations to be paid to all species harmed by your empire, and full cooperation in dismantling the infrastructure of slavery throughout your former territory. And in return, your civilian population will be protected and allowed to resettle on worlds of their choosing. Non-military personnel will be permitted to live free lives under the jurisdiction of the Galactic Council." Zexter's laugh was bitter. "You offer me the chance to oversee the complete destruction of everything my people have built." "Your people built an empire on suffering," Chen replied. "That empire ends today, regardless of your decision. The only question is whether you want to save the innocent lives that still remain." Through the throne room windows, Zexter could see his orbital defenses powering up. Massive energy cannons that could shatter asteroids swiveled to target the human fleet. Shield generators created overlapping fields of protection around critical installations. Fighter squadrons launched from hidden bays, their sleek forms moving to intercept positions. "I have 15,000 ships in this system," Zexter said. "Orbital platforms with enough firepower to sterilize continents. Ground-based defense networks that have never been breached. You command 200 vessels against the most fortified position in the galaxy." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "Emperor, you still don't understand what you're facing." The transmission ended and Zexter turned to Grand Admiral Thexmore. "Begin the attack, destroy them all." What followed was not the glorious battle the Xerians expected. It was systematic annihilation on a scale that defied comprehension. The human fleet didn't attack the orbital defenses or try to fight through the defensive formations. Instead, they deployed thousands of small devices that looked like simple metal spheres. These devices fell toward the planet's surface, ignored by the automated defense systems that had been programmed to target large threats. "My Emperor," reported the sensor operator, his voice rising in alarm. "The devices are landing in the planet's major cities. They appear to be some kind of gravitational manipulation technology." Emperor Zexter watched in horror as his capital city began to tear itself apart. The human devices were creating localized gravity anomalies that pulled buildings into the sky, compressed entire city blocks into dense spheres, or caused structures to fall upward into space. Millions of years of architectural achievement disappeared in minutes. "Target the human ships," Zexter commanded. "Ignore the devices." But when his orbital platforms fired their massive energy cannons at the human fleet, their beams bent around the enemy vessels as if space itself was warped. The humans had somehow extended their gravitational manipulation technology to create defensive fields that redirected incoming fire. "Sir," called out Grand Admiral Thexmore, "the First Defense Fleet reports they cannot achieve target lock. Our weapons are being deflected by gravitational distortions." Meanwhile, human ships began deploying a different type of weapon. Instead of energy beams or missiles, they released clouds of what appeared to be metallic dust. This dust settled on Xerian vessels and began converting their hulls into more of itself, spreading like a technological plague that consumed everything it touched. "Nanoscale disassemblers," whispered Science Director Kexton from his monitoring station. "They're breaking down our ships at the molecular level." Emperor Zexter watched his mighty First Defense Fleet dissolve into expanding clouds of metallic particles. 15,000 ships, including super dreadnoughts that had never known defeat, simply ceased to exist. Their matter was being converted into raw materials that the human devices then used to create more disassemblers. "This is impossible," Thexmore said, staring at the tactical displays in disbelief. "No species possesses this level of technological advancement." But it wasn't advanced technology that had achieved this result. Human archives later revealed that these weapons had been developed through pure scientific determination. When faced with an enemy possessing superior conventional technology, humanity had simply reinvented physics itself. Their scientists had worked 18 hours a day for 2 years straight, sleeping in their laboratories and eating at their workstations, driven by images of enslaved human children and the desperate messages from dying colonies. They had pushed the boundaries of known science past any previous limits, because failure meant the extinction of their species. "My Emperor," came a transmission from the surface, "the capital city defense grid is requesting permission to use scorched earth protocols. If we cannot stop the human devices from consuming our infrastructure, we can at least deny them the resources." Zexter stared at the display screens showing his beautiful capital city being systematically deconstructed by invisible forces. The architectural marvels that had taken millennia to build were disappearing as if they had never existed. His people fled in panic through streets that dissolved beneath their feet. "No," he said quietly. "Open a communication channel to Admiral Chen." The human admiral appeared on screen again, her expression unchanged despite having just achieved the impossible. Behind her, Zexter could see human crew members working with calm efficiency, as if the total destruction of an entire galactic empire was merely another day's work. "Admiral Chen," the Emperor began, "I formally surrender. The Zirian Empire submits to human authority." "Acknowledged," Chen replied. "All military forces will power down immediately. Government officials will report to designated collection points for processing. The dismantling of your empire's infrastructure will proceed according to our schedule." "What of my people?" Zexter asked. "They will be relocated to suitable worlds where they can build new lives without exploiting others. Those guilty of war crimes will face justice. Those who were merely following orders will be given opportunities for rehabilitation." Emperor Zexter felt the weight of 5,000 years of history crushing down on his shoulders. "And what of me?" Admiral Chen's expression became even colder. "You, Emperor, will stand trial for crimes against humanity. The evidence of your personal involvement in enslaving operations is overwhelming. The penalty, if found guilty, is death." "I demand the right to be judged by a jury of my peers," Zexter said desperately. "You will be judged by the representatives of every species your empire enslaved," Chen replied. "If you consider them your peers, then your request is granted." The transmission ended, leaving Emperor Zexter alone in his crumbling throne room. Outside, the Zirian Empire's capital city continued to disappear as human technology systematically deconstructed the foundations of his civilization. He thought of his ancestors, who had built this empire through strength and determination. They had believed that power gave them the right to rule over lesser species, that technological advancement justified any action taken against primitive worlds. They had been wrong. The humans had proven that determination was more powerful than technology, that moral conviction could overcome any material advantage. They had shown that some principles were worth any sacrifice, any cost, any consequence. As Zirian security forces began the process of formal surrender, emergency broadcasts spread across the galaxy. The Zirian Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in known space, had fallen in a single day. Their homeworld lay in ruins, their fleets destroyed, their government dissolved. And the humans had done it all without losing a single ship. The message was clear to every species monitoring the situation. The old order was dead. The time when technological superiority granted the right to enslave and exploit weaker civilizations had ended forever. A new age was beginning, one where the fundamental rights of sentient beings would be protected regardless of their military power or technological development. and humanity would serve as the enforcer of that new age, with the ashes of the Xerian Empire as proof of their commitment. Emperor Zexter walked slowly from his throne room toward the human landing shuttles that had begun arriving in the palace courtyard. Behind him, the last remnants of his empire crumbled into dust. The judgment had been delivered, and justice would finally be served. Hash the message. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in absolute silence. Representatives from over 200 species sat in their designated chambers, watching the central display that showed the ruins of what had once been the Xerian homeworld. Where magnificent cities had stood for millennia, only empty plains remained. The entire planet had been systematically stripped of all artificial structures, leaving behind a world of pristine nature. High Arbiter Velthara called the session to order, her 6 arms trembling slightly as she accessed the day's agenda. We gather to address the complete dissolution of the Xerian Empire and the implications of human intervention in galactic affairs. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that reflected shock, fear, and uncertainty. As of yesterday, the Xerian Empire has ceased to exist. Their government has been dissolved, their military eliminated, their infrastructure dismantled. Approximately 40 billion Xerian civilians have been relocated to designated worlds under Galactic Council supervision. Ambassador Kremak from the Hive Consortium raised one of his insectoid limbs. High Arbiter, what of the Emperor and his administration? Emperor Zexter and 347 high-ranking officials are currently in human custody awaiting trial, Velthara replied. The humans have established what they call a war crimes tribunal to judge those responsible for enslaving operations. Under what authority? Demanded General Korath from the warrior clans. The Galactic Council has jurisdiction over interspecies conflicts. Velthara's expression darkened. General, the humans have made their position clear. They do not recognize our authority in matters they classify as crimes against sentience. They claim the right to judge any individual or organization that enslaves sapient beings, regardless of species or territorial boundaries. A collective murmur of unease rippled through the chamber. Trade Prince Mexler stood up, his golden robes rustling with agitation. This sets a catastrophic precedent if humans can unilaterally declare our laws invalid and impose their own justice. Then perhaps, interrupted a new voice, you should examine whether your laws are worth preserving. Every head in the chamber turned toward the speaker's gallery, where a figure in simple human military dress stood alone. Admiral Sarah Chen had entered the council chamber unannounced and uninvited, walking past security systems that should have prevented any unauthorized access. Admiral Chen, High Arbiter Velthara said carefully, this is a closed session of the Galactic Council. Humans do not hold membership in this body. We didn't ask for membership, Chen replied, walking down the steps toward the central floor. We came here to deliver a message. Security forces from a dozen different species began moving toward the human admiral, but stopped when she made no threatening moves. Her hands remained visible, her posture relaxed, her expression calm. Yet everyone in the chamber felt the weight of absolute authority in her presence. Speak your message, General Korath said, his hand resting on his ceremonial weapon. Admiral Chen reached the center of the chamber and looked around at the assembled representatives. For the past 3 years, this council has watched the systematic enslavement of human colonies. You received our diplomatic protests, our appeals for intervention, our offers of trade agreements in exchange for protection. She paused, letting her words sink in. Your response was to classify the situation as a territorial dispute outside your jurisdiction. You allowed the Xerian Empire to enslave over 8 million human beings because intervention would have been economically inconvenient. Ambassador Zefter's crystalline form flickered. Admiral, the Galactic Council cannot interfere in the internal affairs of member species. The Xerian expansion was conducted according to established protocols. Protocols that permit the enslavement of sentient beings, Chen interrupted. Laws that classify people as property based on their technological development, a system that protects the strong and abandons the weak. These are the realities of galactic civilization, protested Trade Prince Mexler. Resources must be allocated efficiently. Primitive species cannot govern themselves effectively. Stop, Chen's single word cut through the air like a blade. You will not justify slavery to me. You will not explain why suffering is necessary for your prosperity. You will not defend a system built on exploitation." She turned slowly, making eye contact with representatives throughout the chamber. The human message is simple. The age of exploitation is over. Any species that enslaves sentient beings will face the same fate as the Xerian Empire. Any government that treats people as property will be dissolved. Any individual who profits from suffering will face justice. Science adept Korth from the Mind Collective raised a tentacled appendage. "Admiral, you cannot enforce such principles across the entire galaxy. The logistics alone." "We already are," Chen replied. "Human fleets are currently operating in 14 different sectors, investigating reports of slavery and exploitation. We have established monitoring stations throughout known space, equipped with technology you don't understand and cannot counter." The chamber erupted in shocked voices as the implications became clear. Dozens of species began talking at once, their translators struggling with the cacophony of different languages expressing outrage, fear, and disbelief. "You're describing an occupation of galactic civilization," General Korath said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We're describing the enforcement of basic rights," Chen corrected. "Rights that your council has failed to protect for millennia." High Arbiter Velthara regained control of the session. "Admiral, even if humanity possesses the capability you claim, the economic disruption would be catastrophic. Entire sectors of galactic commerce depend on slave labor," Chen finished. "Yes, we're aware. We're also aware that every major power in this chamber profits from exploitation in some form. Gladiator pits, debt bondage, forced labor, genetic modification of sentient species to make them more compliant." She walked closer to the High Arbiter's position. "You've all built your civilizations on suffering, and you've convinced yourselves it's necessary. You're wrong. And you believe humanity can simply reshape galactic society through force?" asked Ambassador Velthara. "We believe sentient beings deserve freedom regardless of their military power," Chen replied. "We believe that advanced technology comes with responsibilities, not privileges, and we believe that some principles are worth any price to defend." Trade Prince Mexler's voice rose in desperation. "But the economic collapse, entire trade networks depend on current labor systems. Trillions of beings depend on those systems for survival." Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. "Prince, we're not here to destroy your economies. We're here to transform them. Forced labor is inefficient compared to voluntary cooperation. Slavery produces inferior results to education and opportunity." She gestured toward the display showing the former Xerian homeworld. "Look at what we accomplished in rebuilding that planet. We didn't use slave labor or forced conscription. Every being working on restoration volunteered, was properly compensated, and was free to leave at any time. The result is better than anything the Xerians achieved in 5,000 years." Science adept Korth's tentacles writhed with confusion. "But how do you motivate beings to work without coercion?" "You give them reasons to care about the outcome," Chen answered. "You share the benefits of their labor. You treat them as partners rather than property. You build societies where everyone has a stake in success." "Impossible," declared General Korath. "Primitive species lack the intelligence and motivation for such cooperation." Chen turned to face him directly. "General, 3 years ago you classified humanity as a primitive species. We lacked faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, and artificial intelligence. By your standards, we should have been easy to enslave." She smiled coldly. "How did that work out for the Xerians?" The chamber fell silent as the general's words died in his throat. Every representative present had studied the reports of humanity's impossible victory over technologically superior forces. None of them had adequate explanations for how it had been achieved. "The truth," Chen continued, "is that you've underestimated the potential of every species you've classified as primitive. You've assumed that technological advancement equals intelligence, that military power equals worth, that complexity equals superiority." She walked to the center of the chamber again, addressing the entire assembly. "You've created a galaxy where innovation is stifled, where creativity is suppressed, where entire civilizations are prevented from reaching their potential, because it's more convenient to exploit them than to learn from them. What do you propose instead?" asked High Arbiter Velthara. "Partnership," Chen replied simply. Real cooperation between species based on mutual respect and shared benefit. Educational exchange programs instead of conquest. Technology sharing instead of exploitation. Trade agreements that benefit all parties instead of enriching only the powerful. And if we refuse, General Korath asked. Chen's expression hardened again. Then you'll follow the Xerians into history, your choice. Ambassador Zefter's crystalline form flickered rapidly. Admiral, you're demanding the complete restructuring of galactic civilization. The social upheaval alone will be less devastating than the alternative, Chen interrupted. We can do this peacefully with cooperation and gradual transition, or we can do it the way we handled the Xerians, but it will happen. She turned toward the chamber's exit, then paused. You have 6 standard months to begin implementing reforms, end all slavery and forced labor, establish educational programs for developing species, create economic opportunities based on voluntary cooperation. We'll be monitoring your progress. And if our reforms are inadequate, called out trade Prince Mexler. Admiral Chen looked back at him with cold certainty. Then we'll complete the process for you. As the human admiral left the chamber, emergency communications began flooding in from across the galaxy. Reports of human ships appearing in every major system, of monitoring stations being established near slave operations, of mysterious technology that seemed to violate known physics. The message had been delivered, and the countdown had begun. The galaxy had 6 months to transform itself voluntarily, or humanity would transform it by force. Either way, the age of exploitation was ending. Whether the galaxy embraced this change or resisted it would determine how painful the transition would be. But the outcome was no longer in question. Humanity had drawn a line in the sand of space and time itself, and they had proven they possessed both the will and the capability to enforce it. The old order was dying, and a new age of freedom was about to be born. The New Dawn. 1 year after humanity's ultimatum to the Galactic Council, Ambassador Maria Santos stood in the newly constructed Unity Station, watching representatives from over 300 species work together in ways that would have been impossible under the old system. The massive space station orbited the former Xerian homeworld, which had become a symbol of transformation rather than destruction. Through the transparent aluminum windows of the diplomatic quarter, Santos could see the planet's surface covered in sprawling cities, unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of the rigid hierarchical structures that had characterized Xerian architecture, these new settlements flowed organically across the landscape, designed by cooperative teams that included dozens of different species. Ambassador Santos, called out Dr. Yexenal, one of the former Xerian scientists who had joined the reconstruction effort. The morning briefing is ready. Santos nodded and walked toward the main conference room, where holographic displays showed the status of transformation efforts across the galaxy. The data was remarkable. Slavery had been eliminated in 87% of previously affected systems. Educational exchange programs had been established between over 200 species, and voluntary cooperation had increased productivity in every sector where it had been implemented. Good morning, everyone, Santos said as she took her seat at the circular table that had replaced the traditional hierarchical arrangement of galactic diplomacy. Around her sat representatives from species that had been enemies just months before, now working together on shared projects. The productivity reports from the Centauri Reconstruction Project are in, announced Director Kexful, a former Xerian administrator who had proven instrumental in organizing the transition. Voluntary cooperation between human engineers and Xerian technicians has increased efficiency by 43% compared to previous forced labor operations. Trade Coordinator Thinmala from the Crystalline Hegemony added, similar results across 17 other joint projects. It appears human theories about motivation and voluntary cooperation are producing measurable benefits. Santos smiled as she reviewed the data. The initial resistance to humanity's demands had given way to curiosity, then enthusiasm, as species discovered that cooperation actually produced better results than exploitation. The economic predictions of catastrophic collapse had proven completely wrong. What's the status on the educational initiatives? Santos asked. Dr. Kexton, formerly the Xerian Science Director and now heading the Galactic Knowledge Exchange Program, pulled up another display. Remarkable progress. We've established learning centers in over 400 systems. Species that were classified as primitive are demonstrating capabilities we never imagined. He highlighted several specific examples. The Verdant Collective, previously exploited for agricultural labor, have developed biotechnology applications that surpass anything we achieved. The Stone Shapers, used as mining slaves, have created architectural techniques that revolutionize construction engineering. The Cloud Dancers, ignored as irrelevant, possess mathematical insights that are advancing our understanding of dimensional physics. Santos nodded thoughtfully. It's almost as if treating people with respect unlocks their potential. The concept is still difficult for many to grasp, admitted Ambassador Velthara, who had become one of humanity's strongest allies on the reformed Galactic Council. Millennia of hierarchical thinking don't disappear overnight. But they are disappearing, Santos pointed out, gesturing to the displays showing cooperative projects across the galaxy. Species that have never worked together are creating things none of them could have achieved alone. The morning briefing continued with reports from various sectors. The warrior clans had transformed their gladiator pits into competitive sports leagues where participants volunteered and were treated as celebrated athletes rather than expendable entertainment. The Trade Federation had discovered that fair exchanges actually generated more wealth than exploitative arrangements. Even the Mind Collective had found that voluntary mental linking produced better results than forced consciousness sharing. "We do have one concerning report," announced Security Coordinator Chen, Admiral Sarah Chen's sister, who had taken charge of monitoring compliance with the new galactic order. "The Void Empire has been less cooperative than other powers." Santos frowned. The Void Empire controlled a remote sector of space and had largely avoided contact with galactic civilization. Intelligence suggested they maintained some of the most brutal slavery operations in known space. "What's their current status?" Santos asked. "They've ignored all diplomatic communications," Chen replied. "No response to our educational offers, no acknowledgement of the new galactic accords, no participation in the transition programs. Our monitoring stations report that slavery and exploitation continue throughout their territory. And their military strength. Significant, they possess technology comparable to the old Xerian Empire, possibly more advanced in some areas. Their isolation has allowed them to develop defensive systems specifically designed to counter human gravitational weapons." Santos considered this information carefully. The success of galactic transformation had been largely peaceful because most species had chosen to cooperate once they understood the benefits. The Void Empire's continued resistance presented a different type of challenge. "Recommendations?" she asked. Dr. Yexenal spoke up. "Perhaps a diplomatic mission. Many species have responded positively to direct cultural exchange." "They've refused all contact," Chen pointed out. "Our diplomatic vessels have been fired upon without warning." Trade Coordinator Thinmala suggested, "Economic pressure, if we restrict their access to galactic trade networks." "They're largely self-sufficient," Santos replied. "Isolation is part of their cultural identity. Economic sanctions might actually strengthen their resolve." Ambassador Velthara leaned forward. "What would humanity recommend? Your approach to the Xerians was effective but final." Santos was quiet for a long moment, considering the weight of the decision. The transformation of galactic civilization had been successful precisely because it offered species a choice: evolve voluntarily or face the consequences. The Void Empire was testing whether humanity would follow through on that ultimatum. "Schedule a meeting with the Defense Council," Santos finally said. "If the Void Empire continues to refuse cooperation, they'll need to understand that the galactic community will no longer tolerate slavery in any form." As the briefing concluded and representatives returned to their various projects, Santos remained in the conference room, looking out at the bustling activity on the planet below. Former slaves worked alongside their former masters on construction projects, scientific research, and cultural exchanges. The transformation seemed almost miraculous. But she knew it had come at a cost. The complete destruction of the Xerian Empire had shocked the galaxy into compliance, but it had also demonstrated humanity's willingness to use ultimate force when necessary. The peace they now enjoyed was built on the foundation of absolute deterrent. Her communication device chimed with an incoming priority message from Earth. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared in holographic form, speaking from the bridge of humanity's newest vessel. Maria, we've received a transmission from the Void Empire. They're offering to negotiate. Santos felt a mixture of relief and suspicion. After a year of silence, what changed their minds? Intelligence suggests they've been monitoring our technological development, Admiral Chen replied. They've apparently concluded that resistance is futile. Their message requests safe passage for diplomatic representatives to Unity Station. Do we trust them? We verify, Admiral Chen said simply. But we also prepare for the possibility that negotiation is merely a delaying tactic while they develop countermeasures. Santos nodded. Arrange the meeting, full diplomatic protocols but maintain security precautions. 2 weeks later, the Void Empire delegation arrived at Unity Station in ships unlike anything previously seen. Their vessels seemed to absorb light, creating zones of absolute darkness that moved through space like holes in reality. The technology was unsettling, but their diplomatic codes were genuine. Ambassador Kathara of the Void Empire materialized in the conference room using some form of advanced teleportation that bypassed all security systems. Her species appeared to be composed of living shadow, with only glowing red eyes visible within their dark forms. Ambassador Santos, Kathara spoke through a universal translator that somehow conveyed emotional undertones. We come to discuss terms. Terms for what? Santos asked carefully. For coexistence, Kathara replied. Our isolation has allowed us to observe your transformation of galactic civilization. We find certain aspects intriguing. She gestured, and holographic displays showed scenes from Void Empire territory. To Santos's surprise, they depicted not the brutal slavery operations that intelligence had reported, but sophisticated cities and advanced technology. You were mistaken about our practices, Kathara continued. We do not enslave other species, we consume them. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as the implications became clear. Santos felt her blood chill as she realized they weren't dealing with another slavery-based empire. Consume, she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. We require the life energy of sentient beings for survival, Kathara explained matter-of-factly. We have harvested primitive species for millennia, taking what we need to sustain our civilization. It is not slavery, it is feeding. The silence in the room was absolute. This was worse than anything the Xerian Empire had done. This was systematic genocide disguised as natural predation. How many? Santos asked quietly. Approximately 2 billion beings over the past millennium, Kathara replied. We are careful to maintain sustainable populations, ensuring that species do not become extinct before we have fully utilized their potential. Santos felt sick. While the galaxy had been focused on eliminating slavery, an entire empire had been systematically consuming sentient beings like livestock. The Void Empire hadn't been ignoring galactic transformation. They had been evaluating whether humanity posed a threat to their feeding operations. What terms are you proposing? Santos asked, though she already knew what humanity's response would be. We will cease harvesting operations in exchange for territorial sovereignty, Kathara said. We require only a small sector of space where we can develop alternative sustenance methods. In return, we offer our advanced technology and knowledge. Santos looked at the holographic displays showing Void Empire technology. Their capabilities appeared to surpass even humanity's revolutionary advances. They offered incredible scientific knowledge, territorial concessions, and an end to their predation. It didn't matter. Ambassador Kathara, Santos said, standing from her chair, there will be no negotiations, no territorial sovereignty, no technological exchange, no coexistence. Kathara's red eyes seemed to brighten with surprise. You would refuse such beneficial arrangements over the fate of primitive species. Over the lives of 2 billion sentient beings, Santos corrected. Over the systematic genocide you've conducted for a millennium, over the fundamental principle that sentient life has value. But surely practical considerations. There are no practical considerations, Santos interrupted. The Void Empire is guilty of crimes against sentience on a scale that surpasses anything we've encountered. Your civilization will be eliminated. Kathara's shadow form seemed to expand with what might have been anger. You cannot hope to defeat us. Our technology is superior to anything you possess. Our dimensional capabilities allow us to strike from impossible angles. You will doom your entire species for the sake of beings you've never met. Santos smiled grimly. Ambassador, you've made the same mistake as the Xerians. You believe superior technology guarantees victory. You're wrong. What could possibly overcome the advantages we possess? The same thing that defeated the Xerians, Santos replied. The absolute determination to ensure that sentient beings are free from predation, regardless of the cost to ourselves. The diplomatic meeting ended with Kathara's departure and immediate activation of humanity's military response. Within hours, human fleets were mobilizing throughout the galaxy, their new allies providing support and resources for what everyone understood would be the final test of the new galactic order. The Void Empire had revealed themselves at the worst possible moment. The galaxy had just experienced the benefits of cooperation and voluntary partnership. The contrast with systematic consumption of sentient beings could not have been starker. As Admiral Sarah Chen prepared humanity's forces for what would likely be their most challenging conflict, she received messages of support from across the galaxy. Species that had once feared human intervention now volunteered their own forces to eliminate the Void Empire threat. The galaxy had learned that some things were worth fighting for, that some principles demanded absolute commitment, and that the strong had a responsibility to protect the weak. The line had been drawn not just by humanity, but by every species that chose freedom over exploitation, cooperation over predation, hope over fear. The final battle for the soul of galactic civilization was about to begin, and this time, humanity would not fight alone. The dawn of true galactic unity was breaking, and nothing would be allowed to extinguish its light.